For 40 years, Maurice Bennett believed in one unshakable truth: his wife. She was his rock, his partner, the love of his life. Together, they built a home, raised 2 children, and grew old side by side. What they had felt perfect, solid, real. On the morning of November 6th, 2023, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Janice hummed softly as she flipped pancakes, the faint gospel radio playing in the background. Maurice smiled, watching the woman he'd adored for decades. Then came a knock at the door. She wiped her hands and opened it. FBI, weapons drawn, no hesitation, no explanation. Not local police. Not detectives. The FBI. Maurice froze. What was happening? Who were they here for? Then came the words that split his world apart. Sir, your wife is not who you think she is. Who had he been married to for 40 years? What had she done? And why had the FBI, not the police, come for her? The lead agent, tall and commanding, stepped forward, eyes locked on Maurice. Sir, do you know who your wife really is? Maurice's gaze shifted to Janice, who stood frozen. What kind of question is that? She's my wife. The agent shook his head. No, she isn't. And she never was. For the first time in 40 years, Maurice saw something new in Janice's face. A flicker of fear, a secret unraveling. And in that moment, Maurice Bennett's world collapsed. Atlanta, summer of 1983. The streets pulsed with neon light and the hum of jazz spilling from bars. Inside Lacey's lounge, a haze of cigar smoke swirled as a saxophone crooned. Maurice, then 31, sat at the bar, tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly groomed mustache. He carried the quiet confidence of a man who'd worked his way up from nothing. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, he'd moved to Atlanta after earning his architecture degree and was already making a name for himself. That's when he saw her. She wasn't like the others. No bright colors, no loud laughter. A dark green dress hugged her frame, her black hair falling in soft waves. She sipped red wine, fingers tapping the glass, her gaze somewhere far away. Maurice approached, voice smooth. A woman like you shouldn't be drinking alone. She looked up, eyes locking on his. After a pause, a small, knowing smile curved her lips. And yet, here I am. I'm Maurice, he said. Janice Davis, she replied, offering her hand. They talked for hours. She was smart, reserved, and intriguing, but guarded. Whenever he asked personal questions, she deflected. A little bit of everywhere. Just me. A fresh start. By 1984, Maurice was in love. When he proposed, she hesitated just a fraction too long before saying yes. They had a courthouse wedding. No dress, no guests from her side. His mother, Evelyn Bennett, whispered after the ceremony, "She ain't got no people at all? No cousins? No friends?" "She told me her parents died when she was young," Maurice explained. Evelyn's face was tight with doubt, but Maurice brushed it aside. Love was enough. In 1985, they moved to Columbus, Ohio. Maurice landed a high-paying job in an architecture firm, and they settled into a quiet, picture-perfect life. Church on Sundays, friendly neighbors, and eventually children. In 1986, their son Micah Bennett was born. 4 years later, in 1990, their daughter Desiree arrived. Janice was a model wife, packing lunches every morning, volunteering at school events, baking pies for church fundraisers, and making sure Maurice always came home to a warm meal. Everyone adored her. She was kind, soft-spoken, and private, but there were details Maurice never questioned. 1. No childhood photographs. Janice claimed everything had been lost in a tragic accident. 2. No family visits, no holiday phone calls, no cousins, no aunts, no uncles. No one ever reached out. 3. Cash-only travel. Whenever they went anywhere, she refused to use credit cards. 4. Locked away documents. Her passport, birth certificate, and Social Security card were kept under lock and key. When Maurice asked why, she laughed it off. Too much identity theft these days. Maurice trusted her completely. For 40 years, he never had reason to doubt her. But on November 6, 2023, that trust shattered, because Janice Bennett had never existed. It had been exactly 40 years, 6 months, and 3 days since Maurice stood before a Fulton County judge and promised to spend the rest of his life with her. For decades of marriage, of raising children, of laughter and unwavering devotion, gone in an instant with a single knock at the door. The kitchen still smelled of coffee and pancakes, but the warmth had been stripped away. The air was heavy and suffocating. 6 federal agents stood scattered through the room, weapons holstered but fingers hovering near the triggers. This was no casual inquiry. They already had their answers. Janice stood near the doorway, one hand gripping the counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wasn't asking why they were there. She wasn't pleading her innocence. And that, more than anything, chilled Maurice to his core. The lead agent stepped forward, his badge from the FBI's Special Investigations Unit catching the kitchen light. His face was unreadable, but his voice cut sharp. "Sir, she is not who you think she is." Maurice blinked. "That's my wife." The agent didn't flinch. "No, she isn't, and she never was." Silence. Janice's shoulders were stiff. Her gaze locked on the floor. She didn't look at Maurice. She didn't look at the agents. She simply stood there, as if the weight of decades was pressing down on her. The agent reached into a folder and spread a set of documents across the table. Old mugshots, fingerprint records, government files stamped classified, and then a photograph, a younger version of Janice, but not quite the same. The same piercing eyes and cheekbones, but the woman in the photo looked colder, harder. Below the image, a name, Miriam Baldwin. Maurice's chest tightened. His heart pounded in his ears. This couldn't be real. "Your wife has been living under a false identity for 40 years, the agent said evenly. "That's impossible," Maurice shot back. "She's Janice Bennett. We have children. We have a life." Janice didn't deny it. She lowered her head, eyes closed, as if bracing for impact. The silence was louder than any confession. The agent's voice was calm, methodical. "Her real name is Miriam Baldwin. In 1977, she was involved in a violent bank robbery in Charlotte, North Carolina. A security guard was shot and killed. She was a getaway driver. She disappeared before she could be arrested. We believe she fled the country. Instead, she changed her name, altered her appearance, and built a new life." Maurice shook his head. "No, you're wrong." Another paper slid across the table. A warrant for Miriam Baldwin's arrest, dated September 1977. Janice finally spoke, her voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the thick air. "I was young. I didn't pull the trigger. I was just a driver. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Maurice's hands shook. "You were part of it. You helped them escape. You ran. You lied to me. You lied to our children." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had no choice." His voice broke, rising in anger. "You always had a choice." Charlotte, North Carolina, September 3rd, 1977. The plan had been simple. Get in, get the money, get out. 23-year-old Miriam Baldwin was reckless, in too deep with the wrong people. She wasn't supposed to set foot inside the bank, just drive the car, and wait 3 minutes. But when a young security guard named David Langston reached for his weapon, one of the robbers panicked. A gunshot echoed. David collapsed, bleeding out in seconds. Miriam froze. She hadn't signed up for murder. But it was too late. They fled, and within hours she was gone. No trace, no footprints, just a ghost. Until now, the lead agent gave the order. 2 agents stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from their belts. Maurice stood frozen, as the woman he had built his life with, the mother of his children, the grandmother of his grandchildren, was placed under arrest. "Janice, no, Miriam, turned him one last time. Please believe me. I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." Maurice's voice was hoarse. "I don't even know who you are." And then she was gone. By 3:45 p.m., Maurice was still sitting in the same chair, the same spot where his life had unraveled that morning. The house was silent, except for the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Her last words echoed in his head. "I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." For 40 years, he had been married to a lie. For 40 years, He had built a life with a woman who never truly existed. Outside, the sunset washed the neighborhood in orange light. But to Maurice, the world no longer felt real. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered. The Bennett's home, once just another suburban house, had become a spectacle. His phone rang constantly. His brother called from Birmingham. Man, I don't even know what to say. Former co-workers left voicemails filled with awkward sympathy. If you need anything at all, just call. But what could anyone say? For 40 years, Maurice had been a respected architect, a devoted husband, a father who raised his kids with integrity. Now, he was the man who had slept beside a fugitive, the man who never knew who his wife really was. And if he hadn't known her, what did that make him? The house wasn't just his, it had been theirs. It was where the children had grown up, where birthdays were marked with cake and noise, where Christmas mornings spilled over with wrapping paper and laughter. Now, it felt like a hollow shell, emptied in a single day. By nightfall, both Micah and Desiree had arrived. Micah, the eldest, had always been protector, the one who carried his father's quiet strength but wielded it in his own way. He paced the kitchen, his hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly that it seemed in danger of splintering. His jaw was clenched hard enough to ache. My whole childhood built on a lie. His voice was low, raw, something Maurice Bennett had never heard from his son before. Desiree, always the more openly emotional of the two, sat curled on the couch, her arms wrapped tight around herself. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her expression wasn't the same as Micah's. She's changed, Dad. She's not that person anymore. Maurice felt like a referee in a match with no chance of a victor. She lied to us. Micah snapped, turning toward him. Everything, every single thing about her. She wasn't who she said she was. And she had no intention of telling us. She would have taken this to the grave. Desiree shook her head, sniffling. She's still our mother. We can't erase everything she's done for us. She raised us, Micah. She loved us. Micah let out a short, bitter laugh. Did she? Or was it all part of the act? Was she just hiding behind us, using us to stay invisible? Ever think about that? The words landed like stones in the room. Maurice didn't answer. He didn't know how. When the kids finally went to bed, he stayed in the silence. Sleep wasn't an option. Not when he discovered that the woman he'd shared a bed with for decades was, in truth, a stranger. The house felt too still. He drifted into the living room and stared at the framed photos on the wall. Wedding portraits, school pictures, snapshots from family vacations. Had all of it been a fabrication? Had the love been real? Maurice opened a cabinet and pulled out a stack of dusty home videos, untouched for years. He slid one into the player, watching the static fade into moving images. There she was, Janice, or rather Miriam Baldwin, smiling and laughing as she cradled baby Micah, bouncing him until he giggled, tucking Desiree into bed, kissing her forehead, whispering that she loved her, sitting beside him on their 10th anniversary, leaning into his shoulder as they danced barefoot in the living room. The memories were real. The past she'd hidden was a lie, but their life together, was it? Maurice pressed his fingers against his temples. What was he supposed to think? What was he supposed to feel? In the days that followed, the reporters came. Questions rained down. Rumors spread. Mr. Bennett, how does it feel knowing your wife was a fugitive? Did you have any idea she'd been living under a false identity? Do you still love her? That last one struck like a gunshot. Did he? Could he? She was his wife, the mother of his children. She had built a life beside him, but she had also deceived him and, in one moment, destroyed the foundation they'd spent 40 years building. Maurice gave no answer. He turned away, shut the door, and stared at the empty chair across the kitchen table, the place where Janice used to sit, the place where everything had unraveled. He didn't know if he would ever stop loving her. But one thing was certain. He would never truly know who she was. And that, more than anything, was the cruelest part. No thick bulletproof walls. Just a row of bolted-down tables and metal chairs. A stage for reunions between the guilty and those they'd left behind. Some inmates sat with hardened faces. Years in here having chiseled away at their humanity. Others clung desperately to their visitors, tried to hold on to something already slipping away. But when Maurice saw her, the rest of the room dissolved. Janice sat at a table near the back, her hands folded. Her shoulders seemed smaller than he remembered. She looked different, not just older, fragile. Her once warm, glowing skin now appeared dull, shadowed by sleepless nights and cold, indifferent walls. Her hair, once always styled with care for church or family gatherings, hung in a flat, lifeless braid. The air inside the facility was thick with disinfectant, sweat, and something else. Something nameless that clung to the walls like the ghosts of forgotten conversations. This was no ordinary lockup. It was a maximum security prison, built for people with no way out, people whose past sins had rewritten the course of their lives. And now his wife was one of them. Maurice's hands were damp, his chest tight, his heartbeat a slow, heavy drum. 2 months. That's how long it had been since the morning that cracked his world in half. 2 months since the FBI had dragged her away in handcuffs. After weeks of dodging his children's questions, after endless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if his marriage had been nothing more than a beautifully executed illusion, he was here, face to face with the woman he thought he knew. The visitation room was not like the ones in the movies. No phones through glass. But it was her eyes that stopped him. For 40 years, those eyes had been his safe place. Now they were strangers, carrying a weight he couldn't name. She swallowed, bracing herself. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and uneven. "Do you hate me?" Maurice's fists curled beneath the table. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her he hated her for what she'd done to him, to Micah, to Desiree, for shattering the life they'd built. But no words came. Instead, he looked at her, the woman who had been his partner for 4 decades, who had raised his children, who had sat beside him at funerals, who had kissed his forehead when he was sick. Brick by brick, lie by lie, they had built a life together. She didn't look away. She didn't cry. She just waited, hands trembling slightly, her body tense for the blow she expected. After what felt like forever, Maurice finally exhaled. His voice was low, steady, and heavy with something neither of them could name. "I don't know who you were back then, but I know the woman who raised my children, the woman who stood beside me through everything. That's the woman I love, and I don't know how to stop." Janice closed her eyes. A single tear slipped free. He had forgiven her, but he would never forget. Maurice hadn't attended every day of the trial. He'd promised himself he would, but the first time he walked into that courthouse and saw her in an orange jumpsuit, shackles binding her wrists and ankles, something inside him broke. The courtroom had been packed. Family, friends, neighbors. People who had once called Janice a trusted friend, a sister in faith. Now they were there to watch her fall. The prosecution didn't pull punches. Janice Bennett, born Miriam Baldwin, hadn't just been an accomplice. She had actively participated in a violent crime that claimed a man's life. For 46 years, she'd evaded justice while the victim's family endured their grief. She'd built her new life on deception, knowing the day the truth surfaced, it would destroy everything. Her public defender painted a different picture of a young woman manipulated, pressured into a crime she never truly chose. Of 4 decades lived without another misstep. A loving mother, a faithful wife, a respected member of her community. She is not the same woman she was in 1977. The attorney argued, but the law did not care about who she had become. It cared only about what she had done. When the verdict came, Maurice sat in the back, his pulse pounding in his ears. Guilty. Janice slumped forward, her shoulders trembling. The judge's voice was firm, unyielding. "Janice Bennett, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15. No outburst. No plea for mercy. Only the clink of chains as they led her away. I don't expect you to wait for me." Her voice was soft, barely more than a whisper. Maurice Bennett stared down at his hands, at the gold wedding band resting on his finger. He had thought about taking it off. He had even tried, but every time, it felt like erasing something that had once been real, something that had existed, even if it had been built on a lie. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," he admitted quietly. "Janice Bennett, known to the world now as Miriam Baldwin, reached across the table, her fingertips grazing his knuckles. "Maurice, don't let my past destroy your future." He swallowed hard, knowing deep down this would be the last time he'd see her, the last time he'd hear her voice anywhere, but in his memories. He didn't know what words could possibly be enough. So he said nothing. He simply stood, turned, and walked away. When he stepped outside, the cold winter air hit him like a slap to the face. Freedom. For 40 years, he had loved a woman who never truly existed, but the love had been real. That truth, more than anything, was the hardest to accept. The memories still lingered. Sunday dinners, long road trips, the way she'd secretly reach for his hand when she thought no one was watching. But now, the truth had changed everything. Could love still be real if it was born from a lie? Somewhere miles away, in a cold, gray prison cell, Janice, Miriam, woke every morning to the clanging of steel doors. The life she had built, the life she had stolen, was gone. No soft bed, no warm coffee, no family, just concrete walls and the bitter taste of regret. She had once escaped her past, rewritten her story, and convinced the world she was someone else. But in the end, the past always finds you. The world had moved on without her. Her children stopped visiting. Her grandchildren would grow up not knowing her. Maurice never went back. The woman he loved was now nothing more than a memory. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Some truths cannot be undone. But here's the question. Would you have forgiven her? Would you have walked away or stayed? Can someone truly outrun their past? Or does it always catch up? How well do we really know the people closest to us? One man loved his wife for 40 years, until he discovered she was someone else entirely. And now, he must live with a question that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Was the love real or just another deception? If this story made you think, made you question, made you wonder, what would you have done? Subscribe for more gripping, real-life stories that challenge everything you think you know. Because in the end, truth is always stranger than fiction. Join the journey. Hit that button and be part of the next stories. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.